I started growing in 1983, and I established my company in 1985.
Okay.
And then I opened the first coffee shop dispensary in 1992. It was one big adventure, of course, because when I started growing in the early 80s, there was no weed in Holland. And I started growing in 1983, and I established my company in 1985.
Okay.
And then I opened the first coffee shop dispensary in 1992.
Okay.
And then we opened another one in 95, and another one in 97, and then 2007.
And what about this 35 story?
Yeah, well, it was one big adventure, of course, because when I started growing in the early 80s, there was no weed in Holland.
Okay.
There was only, at that time, Ben from Sensi Seed, but he was not really growing yet. And it was the first American coming, it was an old man with some skunk plants. He died a few years ago. And a few guys got some seeds, and that's how we started growing in Amsterdam. And the first variety was, I think, a skunk one.
Mm-hmm.
That came back from some people through Afghanistan, some army people. They brought it back a long time ago. And I got my hands on this, started making clones, 1983, 1984. And I was just a commercial grower at that time. So I was very young, and I was just growing, and nobody knew the smell, so you could grow everywhere in Amsterdam. I had one grow, was above the police station. And I remember one night where I was with my friend that the fire department came because the cinema was also there, and our floor was higher than the cinema.
Okay.
And luckily it was raining really hard that night, but my friend forgot to close the valve of the tank, the water. And the water was going into the cinema, so all the people had to go out of the cinema. And the fire department came to see what was going on. But it was raining really, really hard. We were so lucky. And then we find out it was our fault, but they never saw. And yeah, slowly my interest moved into genetics because of my traveling. I grew up in Africa and in Asia. And then I got my hands on some Central Africa sativas, and I started flowering them. And I made a few kilos of that. And then at that time there was already a few coffee shops, famous coffee shops, like the Bulldog was already existing because it opened in 75, before me. But there was only hash. In Holland was only a hash culture. So you have your tobacco, you put your hash, and that's it. There was maybe some Jamaican, little bit weed that was coming with the ships, but not a lot. So we had the skunk, which we start selling to the coffee shops. And then I bring the sativas. But the price was, of course, much higher. And I went to my friends from the Bulldog and from other shops, and I give them all 2 kilos. I said, please try this for free. And I come back in a few weeks, and then you tell me your story, you know? But I was very young, so I underestimated the dealers who were not interested to help me. And after 4 weeks I came back, and all my stuff I got back. In Holland they say, we don't like this, it smells like cat piss. And the taste is not good, and we don't like the workout. People prefer to smoke the skunk or hashish. Okay, so that was a big problem because I believed in my product, you know, and I was a chef at the same time because I was working in restaurants. I said to my wife, I said, this stuff is so good, you know, why don't people want to smoke this, you know? I didn't realize, you know. So this is already 88, 89, 90. And then my wife said at one point, listen, if you think this is really good, why don't we open our own coffee shop? But we had no money, we had 3,000 euros, you know, guilders at that time, you know. So, and then we also decided to, like you see this CBD weed shop now here, you know, it's like a whole new concept. We also decided at that time to come with a new concept. So when your mother and my mother pass in the street and see this place, they don't know it's a coffee shop. It looked like a modern artistic cafe with alcohol. So all the artists come there, the writers come there, everybody come there, you know, everybody's welcome. So we said, okay, let's open a shop like this with alcohol, and we invite the police and the mayor. There was a funny story because 10 years later, the mayor reminded me of that letter, because he said this was the first time that a coffee shop owner wrote a letter to the government and invite us. We thought, who is this guy? What is he thinking that we're really going to come? You know, and later I became the spokesman for the Cannabis Retailers Association. And then he reminded me of that letter. He said, you were the guy who sent us that letter. We nearly wanted to go actually, because this was such a surprise, because coffee shops and government were like far away from each other, you know. So we opened this cannabis cafe, which was very modern, very, you know, different style. And then the first 2 years we had absolutely no business because nobody wanted to smoke our weed. Because we were the first coffee shop in Holland that only had weed. We had a little hash, but we had like 20 varieties of weed. First 2 years, nothing happened. 92, and then 93, the Kennedy family, who owned High Times magazine, they had a consortium of magazines. They had 20 magazines, and one of them was High Times. They came by in April, and they said, hey, Arjan, I had no idea who they were. Huh? I didn't know High Times. I didn't know nothing. I was 27 years old. And I said, you want to enter a competition? We're going to do the first competition of the world about the best marijuana. I said, yeah, sure, why not? I had nothing to lose, no? And so in Thanksgiving, which is in November in America, this is April, we're talking now, I totally forgot about everything. It's now November, it's dark, it's raining like in Holland, you know. And suddenly I get a phone call, there is 700 Americans in Amsterdam and the cannabis is going to start now. What? And they nominated 10 coffee shops in Amsterdam. So all the Americans go everywhere and they arrive in my coffee shop. Luckily I had still the same weed, enough. And we start, you know, playing, and for the first time my club was also full with people. And all the Americans said, oh, this is really great, we never smoked this before, this is fantastic. And I was like, okay, my wife was there. I called my old friend, they'd all come to help, you know, because we had like 200 people inside all the time. Well, make a long story short, after 1 week there was a big ceremony in the Buddha discotheque under the Bulldog, which is close to our greenhouse coffee shop now. And then there were 6 prizes and we won 5 of the 6 prizes, first prizes, which we never expected because we were in the back drinking and having a good time and smoking, and then they called us, you know. But you have to realize, we're talking about 93. At that time, this was the first World Championship in marijuana. There was more than 30 television stations. There was CNN, BBC, South African television, everything, because there is some crazy magazine holding an illegal cup in Amsterdam, so everybody wants to document this. So because of this, I had to give like 100 interviews, and then we went like this. So there was a little bit the history of how we kept believing in our product and kept pushing it through the coffee shop, which was a normal coffee shop where your mother and my mother could go inside and not only people smoking, but also having a drink and a good talk. And then from there on, yeah, the rest is history, of course, because then we started all the other things.
There start another story.
Then start all other stories, yeah, a lot. There was the story of the first greenhouse.
Yeah. And you have been acclaimed as the king of
yes, that
cannabis.
was also because of High Times.
Exactly.
So they appointed me king of cannabis because of all the new varieties that I was creating.
They put you on the cover.
They put me 2 times on the cover, in 95 and 99, yes. Bob Marley was 1 time, Mick Jagger was 1 time, I was 2 times. Yeah, that was funny, yeah. So that was really good for us.
Are you still breeding today?
Yeah, we're still working. We have a big project going on in Congo and some other small projects left and right. Yeah, we're still working as always. Actually, we are working more than ever.
And you personally?
Yeah. Since March, I'm not flying because of the COVID.
Okay.
But yeah, normally I'm every month I'm 1 week in Africa and I'm 1 week in Canada in our factory. So yeah, we have 2 big factories, and we are extending. Probably we'll have more in the future.
Okay.
And we are now also probably going to get a factory in Holland very soon. We started this strain hunt project after the King of Cannabis project. The King of Cannabis was created to create awareness in America. So at one point, Holland was a lot under pressure in the late 90s and early 2000s, especially from France, Sweden and America and the United Nations. So there was continued push to stop the coffee shops. So at one point, we said we had a big issue, yeah? So me and a lot of other coffee shops, we came together And we said, okay, we have to now start lobbying